Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for tuning in to the very first non-picks focused video on this channel. Today, we're going to be giving out report cards for all 32 NFL teams. This is going to be a longer video. There's a lot of things to cover, a lot of coaches to talk about. I will say we went 7-7 in our picks last week. Not the greatest week, a record of 86-51. But we're just going to jump right on into it because this might take a while. So let's start with the Dallas Cowboys. I gave the Dallas Cowboys a B. For those interested, I have graded teams based on metrics such as points per game, offensive yards per game, defensive points allowed per game, turnover differential, and injuries sustained throughout the season. I gave the Cowboys a B because they've maintained a top 10 offense and actually have a top 10 defense as well. And all these stats are going into week 9 of the NFL season, so it's a midpoint here. When you have a top 10 offense and defense and you're in position to make the playoffs, it's really difficult for me to give you anything lower than a B. They should have beat the Jets. That's a huge detriment to their grade here. But again, they're in position to make the playoffs. They're winning games they're supposed to win. And if they keep doing that, they're going to make the playoffs. Whether or not it goes further than that, that's yet to be seen. But you have one of the best offensive lines in the league, and you have one of the best running backs in the league with a quarterback that actually plays pretty well. I think a B is a fair grade. We're going to roll into the Baltimore Ravens now. I've decided to give the Baltimore Ravens an A-. The reason they don't have an A or an A+ is because their defense, but even then, an A- is still in the upper echelon of teams in the league, which I believe Baltimore has cemented themselves as. Baltimore's offense is a pain to plan for. It's dominated almost everyone that they've played against, really minus Kansas City and Cleveland. I think the Ravens now are starting to find ways to get Lamar Jackson comfortable in this offense, whether it's sustainable or not. In the context of this argument, it doesn't matter because we're only looking at this season, and this season, the Baltimore Ravens, in my opinion, are a shoo-in for the playoffs, and they're going to get an A- from me. Let's look at the Minnesota Vikings now. I gave the Minnesota Vikings and Mike Zimmer a B. The reason I gave them a B is they stumbled out of the gate early. If they would have hit the stride that they're on at the beginning of the season and not had to go through that whole circus with blaming Kirk Cousins for everything, I would have given them a higher grade than that. I think that Zimmer, because when you look at the numbers, and the numbers I have here, I'm looking at my notes, the Vikings had the number 3 overall defense. That is amazing. And even then, they were the number 3 offense in yards. They produced the 3rd most yards in the league. Again, you have top 10. This is top 5 we're talking about in 2 categories. I can't give you anything lower than a B. The only problem is it's division play. I mean, this is getting into intangibles now. Mike Zimmer has issues against the Packers and issues against the Bears. And if you can't win games in your division, it's going to be hard for you to actually go anywhere in the postseason. I think the B is the fair grade. Due to those points, it's way too hard to go anywhere if you can't win division games. Let's look at the Houston Texans now. And the Houston Texans, to me, are a really interesting team because the defense is always supposed to be their biggest strength always going into seasons. But Bill O'Brien is an offensive head coach, and he's got Deshaun Watson playing at a super high level. The numbers here, points per game, 9th. Offensive yards is 4th. Defensive points allowed is 18th. They're record-wise, they're about the same as they were last year. But Bill O'Brien is still showing that he is able to help Deshaun Watson progress. So I gave him a B- just because they didn't take as big of a leap as they did from last year. They still can't get over the Colts. Bill O'Brien's kryptonite has kind of been Indianapolis to this point. I see a lot of room for improvement, though. This is probably the most upside of a B- that I can give. I envision the Texans making the playoffs still and Deshaun Watson being in the MVP conversation through most of the season here. Kansas City. I gave Kansas City and Andy Reid a B-. And the reason I gave them a B- is they're starting to play down to their competition. They have the 17th overall defense here and the 5th offense in scoring yards and the 4th scoring offense. Offensively, we knew Kansas City was going to be amazing. That's Andy Reid's focus here. We know that's going to be great coming in, but he still hasn't fixed the defense. The defense is giving them fits. If they don't get it fixed, they're not going to go anywhere in the playoffs again. You need to have a stout defense when you're going against top teams in the league. I mean, if they meet Baltimore again, we don't really know what's going to happen because Baltimore has actually gotten better. I would argue Kansas City's gotten worse, but when you have an injury to your quarterback, it always complicates things. They've had injuries kind of all over the board as well because Chris Jones has gotten hurt, but I expected more from Andy Reid. Too many close games in my opinion, but even then, a B- is not a bad grade. There's still room for improvement. There was an injury. I'm going to roll with a B-. The San Francisco 49ers. I'm giving them an A+. How could you give Kyle Shanahan anything lower than an A+? This is a team that was in the weeds for the last couple of years. Sure, their quarterback was hurt almost every single year, but you have a top 5 defense that it just gets after everybody. And even then, the offense, numbers-wise, doesn't look great. But what Kyle Shanahan does amazingly on offense is when you need to get yards or you need to score points, they always seem to do it. He always seems to also have an answer for anything a defense throws at him. I think that there's a lot more X's and O's than numbers that goes into analyzing the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan's offense in particular. You could argue against the A+. An A- is probably more of a fair grade for this team, but because of the huge improvement in record, it's really hard for me not to. I think Kyle Shanahan's he's going to be an incredible candidate for Coach of the Year, but I don't think he wins it, and you'll hear why later. The Atlanta Falcons, our first D, and it's actually a D-. Dan Quinn has one of the worst defenses in the league, which is supposed to be his focus. He came from Seattle, Legion of Boom, went to a Super Bowl with Atlanta, and his defense is garbage. It's a turnstile. I think it's almost worse than Miami's, but it's not. It's not worse than Miami's, but Miami's trying to lose games. That's what you really need to look at here. Atlanta, even points per game. Offensively, they're supposed to be strong too. They're 21st in points per game, but they're 7th in yards. They just don't score. I think that the Falcons have been an incredible disappointment, and I feel bad for all Atlanta fans everywhere. I don't have any excuses for Dan Quinn. It's a D-. The Los Angeles Rams. So this is an interesting one because we have 8th in yards and points per game, 15th in defense, 0 turnover differential, but they have less wins at this point than they did last year. They're coming off of a Super Bowl. I'm giving Sean McVay a C+. His offense has been stopped by a couple of different teams now. It's not as unstoppable as it was before. They're beating up on really bad teams. I don't think Sean McVay has made actual adjustments to make his team any better than they were last year. I think he's banking off of the success from this Super Bowl run, which is really sad because Sean McVay is a copycat league and everyone's trying to copy Sean McVay, but Sean McVay can't even copy himself. He's not adjusting and renovating his offense to combat the things that defensive coordinators are doing to stop him. The offense is still very good, but the defense is starting to fall off. They're starting to move pieces around. We're going to have to see how Jalen Ramsey impacts this defense going forward to the second part of the season. I don't think the Rams make the playoffs this year. I think unless both teams from the NFC West get the wild cards, I'm talking Seattle and the Rams because I'm pretty sure San Francisco is winning that division. The Rams need to get the 6th seed to make the playoffs. I don't think it happens. So I'm going to give them a C+ just because of the drop-off from last season. The Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to give this team a B. Russell Wilson is this whole team. And I know it's head coach and team grades, but Russell Wilson is the reason why this team doesn't have a lower grade or a worse record. Pete Carroll is a really good coach still. He's a very charismatic coach. Players definitely respond to him. But they're doing the same exact thing they were doing last year. It's just, it happens to be working. They've rid the locker room of some character guys. The team's rallying around Russell Wilson. I would argue, honestly, that Russell Wilson is more of a coach on that team than Pete Carroll is. I think Russell Wilson is more of the leader on that team than Pete Carroll is. Pete Carroll and him just make a very dynamic duo, much like a duo we'll talk about later in this. I think a B is a very respectable grade still. That's not a slight on the Seahawks at all. I just think there's room for improvement on defense. They give up a lot of points on defense, and Russell Wilson is good enough to keep them in games and win the games for them, but unless they improve the defense, the grade's not going to get much better. Especially considering they're 20th overall in defense. Like that's not good enough for a playoff team. The Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm giving them a B+, and a lot of the reason I'm giving them a B+ is because of how they rebounded from injury to Nick Foles. They had a 6th-round rookie come in and just absolutely light it up for him. That rookie, however, is not the starter anymore. They're going back to Nick Foles. So maybe things will actually even get better for Jacksonville, but he exploded their offense. Numbers, they're 10th in yards, 17th in points. On defense, they're 12th and have a +1 turnover differential. This is a team that's a couple years removed from an AFC championship appearance, but a lot of turnovers that they traded Jalen Ramsey. Malik Jackson is gone. There's a lot of people rotating out and leaving this team, and they're still finding ways to win. I think Doug Marrone doesn't get enough credit as a coach. I think he's an incredible coach. He was great in Buffalo. He's been great so far in Jacksonville. It's time to give him the credit he deserves. Maybe if they had one more win, I'd give him the A-, but for now, we're going to give him a B+ with room to improve. The Detroit Lions and Matt Patricia, you get a B-. You're a little bit snake-bitten, but some of it is still self-inflicted. There's a lot of times where the defense is still letting you down. It's weird because it's not a consistent letdown with the Lions. It's one week their offense will let them down. Another week their special teams might let them down. I don't think that's happened this year so far, though. And another week their defense will let them down. Matt Patricia is starting to settle into his role, though, and they've won some very good games and they've lost some very winnable games. They're not quite the Tennessee Titans as far as unpredictability goes, but they're getting there. I just need to see more from Patricia, but I like what I've seen so far, so I'm going to give him a B-. The New Orleans Saints. Here we go. The second duo, and I knocked the mic. My fault. This is my pick for Coach of the Year, is Sean Payton. The way that he was able to rebound from the quarterback injury, win every single game that Teddy Bridgewater started, this team looks like a Super Bowl contender. With an incredibly underrated defense and Drew Brees returning and Alvin Kamara returning on offense, Sean Payton has crafted one of the best teams in the league, and it's a sleeper team because not a lot of people think, with San Francisco getting all the hype and Green Bay even getting a lot of hype, a lot of people are sleeping on the Saints still, but they consider them a playoff contender, but not a Super Bowl contender as far as I've seen in the media. This team is my Super Bowl pick still. And I think Sean Payton's done an incredible job. I'm giving him an A+. The Green Bay Packers, Matt LaFleur, you get an A+ as well. First-year head coach, and he's by far the best one out of the bunch. Upon doing this research, they had only lost one game, and it was to the Eagles. I think he's done an amazing job of renovating the offense, getting the running backs involved. That's a huge thing for Aaron Rodgers. The running backs are now involved. Mike Pettin is running that defense, and LaFleur, I think, has done the right thing, and he's letting Mike Pettin do his thing, which is amazing. And it's made one of the most fun Packer teams in recent memory. They've encountered so many injuries at the wide receiver position, and Aaron Rodgers is still finding ways to make it work. This is another team that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on, but not really because you have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. But when we look at the numbers, 7th in points, 11th overall in defense, and 13th in yards on offense with a +7 turnover differential, how can I give them anything other than an A+? The Oakland Raiders. This is a team I crap on a lot. I don't know why. It might be John Gruden in the Hard Knocks thing. I'm giving John Gruden an A-. Through all of the turmoil of the offseason, the Oakland Raiders are still in the race for their division, and they play in the same division as the Kansas City Chiefs. John Gruden has created a hard-nosed, never-quit football team, and I think it's weird because when you look at their stats, they have a -3 turnover differential. They're 18th in points, 14th in yards on offense, and 28th on defense. This is an intangibles pick if I've ever seen one, though. I think that they've surpassed expectations. They're totally on the right track. They have a lot of first-round picks coming as well. Beware of the Oakland Raiders in the coming season. I think this is a great building block to build off of. I'm mainly giving them the A- as a apology almost for not evaluating them correctly going into the season. So it's a little bit of a makeup grade, but I think it's well warranted. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Bruce Arians, you get a C. So you bring in Todd Bowles, who's not the head coach, I understand that. But you bring in Bruce Arians to try and fix Jameis Winston and get this offense rolling, but you're 18th in points, 14th in yards, and 28th in defense. And you haven't made an improvement from last season from Dirk Cutter. I think that's inexcusable. Bruce Arians comes out of retirement to take this job. He must have seen something, and something is not working. Tampa's still a good team, But they were a decent team last year. They're a little bit better than last year. I don't see a ton of improvement, and I don't think Bruce Arians is sticking around for very long, which makes improvement difficult, especially if he retires again after this season, which he might. The defense is totally dragging them down. Jameis Winston can't win the big game is what it seems like, in the clutch especially. Bruce Arians needs to do a little bit of a better job coaching that team on the offensive side and maybe even stepping in on the defensive side. The New England Patriots. I don't want to spend, come on. It's Bill Belichick. This is the greatest coach of all time. It's an A+. I don't need to say much more. They had the best defense in the league going into that week. I'm not saying much more. It's an A+. Come on. The Los Angeles Chargers. You get a C+. I'm actually going to change that grade. We're going to change that grade to a B- because they've been ravaged by injury. I think they've experienced at least 6 injuries this year to main starters. That sucks, and that's not fun. Phillip Rivers, though, is playing down. Melvin Gordon wasn't great when he first came back. No one other than Keenan Allen is playing well at receiver. It wasn't until the last couple of weeks that the defense started getting stuff together, but let's look at the numbers here. 23rd in points, 17th in yards on offense, but 10th in defense. The defense is actually why I'm going to up the grade to a B-, but they're keeping pace a little bit, but it's still disappointing thus far. We're going to have to see how it goes in the second half of the season. The Indianapolis Colts. Frank Reich, you get an A-. You're talking about losing your quarterback. Losing a star quarterback like Andrew Luck, and you rebound with Jacoby Brissett and come out and beat the Chiefs and then beat the Texans. The numbers don't look great for Indy. We're looking at 16th in points, 18th in offensive yards, 14th in points allowed with a 0-point differential. They're a little bit better than they were last year, but they had Andrew Luck last year. This is a team that thrives when their back is against the wall and they are scrambling. I see great things in the future for the Colts and Frank Reich. Maybe not the playoffs again this year, but I definitely see them being a contender for years to come. This is much like the Oakland grade. It's going to be an A-. Buffalo. Sean McDermott, you get an A. I think that the Bills are fantastic. I really like the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen's progression is starting to really ramp up. They got some really great receivers in John Brown and Cole Beasley. Devin Singletary's playing really well. You got a veteran in Frank Gore. You have a top 5 defense. Is it a top 5 defense? It is. It's the 5th overall defense. That's what I get for not looking at my notes. I don't know how I can give the Bills anything other than an A. They've only lost twice, and they've lost to 2 really good teams. They lost to the Patriots and the Eagles. So in the coming weeks, I don't think their schedule gets much harder, so I'm going to pencil the Bills in as a playoff team, as a wild card team. And I'm really excited to see how Josh Allen performs going forward. The Cleveland Browns, you get a D- Freddie Kitchens because you're dumb. Never have I seen a team try so hard to impress people than the Cleveland Browns. From the receivers wearing Joker cleats or dark tinted visors or watches, sorry Odell, or the quarterback lashing out at the media. I mean, the only one who's keeping his mouth shut is Chubb, and he's the best player on the team. Freddie Kitchens has no control over this team. He doesn't care. And if you really look at their offense, which is why Freddie Kitchens got hired in the first place, they aren't helping their team at all. You have Odell Beckham Jr. and you barely target him. Baker Mayfield is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league when he's not under pressure. A lot of people will say the offensive line is bad, but he is the only quarterback in the NFL who has more interceptions than touchdowns when not under pressure. He's definitely in regression. I think Freddie Kitchens is also in regressions. I don't think he keeps the job at the end of the year. I see worse things coming for this Browns team. As you can see on my wall, all my Brown stuff is gone because I'm done with Freddie Kitchens. And you should be too. I would give him an F, but that would be disrespectful for the team actually trying to tank. Because they're not. They're just bad. The Philadelphia Eagles. I'm actually going to up this grade as well. I had it as a C+. We're going to give it a B-. Doug Peterson has had an up and down year, and so has Carson Wentz, but they've won games when they've kind of needed to, and they're starting to put a couple of wins together. They're near the bottom half in every category. They have a negative turnover differential. They have a worse record than they did last year, but still, I think they're on the up and up. They've run into a ton of injuries, and I think that's what I didn't consider when I took my notes. This is another team that they're getting a B- because I think it's like an incomplete. I don't think we've seen them at full power. I think they're starting to get to full power, and I'm excited to see where they are going forward. I'm going to roll with a B- for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Arizona Cardinals, Cliff Kingsbury, you get a B- as well. I'm not thrilled with how you've coached, but you were given one of the worst teams in the league, and you've made them competitive, and you've beaten the teams you should beat. That is a huge thing. You're not losing games by a lot. You're staying competitive in every game you're in. Your offense is very, very good, which was your focus. Your defense needs help, but that will come with time. I think it's unfair to judge Cliff Kingsbury on defense when he literally brought in Vance Joseph to just say, you run the defense and that's it. But I'm still going to mark him down for it because he's still the head coach. I think a B- is more than a fair grade. I think there's a lot of great things coming for the Cardinals. Maybe not this year, but they're going to have some nice low picks maybe this year and next year. But once those picks turn into players, I expect great things out of this team. The Carolina Panthers, you also get a B-, and it is also because of how you've handled your quarterback situation. Kyle Allen has come in and played really well, but you also have, in my opinion, the MVP of the NFL, and that's Christian McCaffrey. There's nothing this guy can't do. He keeps them in every single game that he plays in. Ron Rivera has actually coached an incredibly good defense and is just letting Christian McCaffrey win the games for them on offense. He knows his place. That's why Ron Rivera gets a B- here. He's adjusted very well to pressure, and I am very excited to see what this team does going forward as well. The New York Giants, Pat Shurmur, you get a C+. You get a C+ because Daniel Jones has actually played pretty well under you. He's making some rookie mistakes. I don't have a problem with that. I think that that's getting overblown a little bit. He does play in New York. They're also running into a ton of injuries at wide receiver as well. Their defense is hot garbage, though. Oh man, the Giants' defense is a turnstile. But that's not really Pat Shurmur's fault, in my opinion. It is a little bit, which again, that's why he doesn't get a B here. Pat Shurmur makes some curious decisions in the fourth quarter. Doesn't really go for wins a lot of the time because I think he knows his team's not ready to win. This is another team that down the road I see some really good things happening to. So I'm excited to see where they go. Cincinnati, you get a D. Cincinnati hasn't handled much of anything very well. Sure, they're missing A.J. Green, but you decide to bench Andy Dalton at the halfway point of the season when Andy Dalton's not the reason why you're losing games. Your defense is, and yeah, it's your defense. I think Andy Dalton's played really well this year. He's not getting a really fair shake, and they're punting the season. But they've played close in a lot of games here this year. I see improvement coming because there's not much worse than you can get because they haven't won a game yet. Tennessee, you get a C+ because you benched Marcus Mariota. You finally benched Marcus Mariota, which is the first good coaching move that Mike Vrabel has made in his career. The Titans are way too inconsistent to give anything other than a C, but we bumped them up to a C+ because of a good coaching decision. I don't want to talk too much about them. I mean, they're about as average as it gets, but not really. They're terrible on offense. 28th in points. Did I read that right? No, 26th in points, and 27th in offense. But they're 4th in defense. They have a great defense under Mike Vrabel, but their offense is so bad, and their defense gives up points when they need to not give up points every single time. They're too inconsistent. So I'm going to roll with the C+. Pittsburgh, Mike Tomlin, you get a B. You've been ravaged by injury as well because Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. If you have to play a rookie and you're treading water in your division, I mean, shoot, they're better than Cleveland. That's good enough for me. Trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick has paid off very well. The defense is really shutting people down and doing a great job of taking people out of games. Mason Rudolph has actually played pretty well as well for a first-year starter. I, again, see some pretty good things in the future for Pittsburgh, and they might need to make a decision on Ben Roethlisberger depending on how Mason Rudolph closes out the season. I'm very impressed with Pittsburgh so far. Chicago, I'm not impressed with you. You get a C. They need to dump Mitch Trubisky, and Matt Nagy has no idea how to fix this Mitch Trubisky problem. He was hired for his innovation on offense, and last year it worked. Much like Sean McVay, he's not making very many adjustments. He's just kind of rolling Trubisky out there and going, my defense will win the game. And there was a good defense there before he even got there. Like, there was talent on that defense before he even got there. It just didn't. It's like it's like Mark Jackson and Steve Kerr. Like, there was talent on the Warriors before Steve Kerr got there. He just unlocked the potential. Vic Fangio unlocked the potential of that team. I don't see a lot of great things coming for the Bears. I think that they might actually be 4th in the division come the end of the season. Matt Nagy's job will be fine, but he's going to have to make some adjustments going forward. The Washington Redskins. You get a D. I was going to give you a D minus, but Jay Gruden was actively trying to get fired. This is like an incomplete as well, because I only have like 5 or 6 weeks of data to go off of. When your coach is trying to get himself fired, I don't feel it's fair to grade you, but I will give you a D because of your record and your incompetence in games. I apologize to Redskins fans that I don't have much more to say, but again, your coach was actively trying to get fired and it was kind of obvious. So we can call it an incomplete, I guess. Miami, you get an F. You are actively trying to lose games. Now, this is before they just beat the Jets, but it just seems like you are tanking and intentionally trying to lose games for the draft picks. That's not really bad coaching. It's just immoral coaching. And it is bad coaching because Miami is last in every category except for offensive yards. The only team that's worse than them is the Jets, who is the only team they've beaten this year. But that's after the fact of this research. So Miami, you get an F. I'm not really going to pay you much more attention. Sorry, Miami fans. The light might be getting closer, though, as next year approaches. New York Jets. Adam Gase, you get a D minus. Adam Gase, this offensive guru, and you are 31st in points per game and 32nd in yards on offense, and your defense is 25th in points allowed under Greg Williams, which is normal. Greg Williams' defenses are good, but they give up a lot of points. Adam Gase is a weirdo. I don't think he's a very good coach. I think that he puts his quarterbacks in situations that they can't win in because they're not Peyton Manning. He's like, oh, I coached Peyton Manning. 1 year of coaching Peyton Manning has given Adam Gase like 4 years of head coaching, and it's ridiculous to me. The guy's a great coordinator, but not a great head coach, kind of like Norv Turner, but he's worse than Norv Turner. D minus, New York Jets. And finally, my apologies. That was our last team. So let me know down in the comments if you watched the whole video, because I know this one was an incredibly long one. Like I said, the picks will be on the ticker. We'll go over that next week. I let you know the record already. It was 86-51. Leave a comment on any other videos you'd like me to do or discussion topics. And I appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great week and enjoy this week of football. Be sure to subscribe and like and share the video as well so I can keep doing these kinds of videos, guys. Thank you so much for the support. Love you all. Bye. Hi everybody, Future Rob here. I actually forgot to do the Denver Broncos in my video, so we're going to do them right now. Give them a grade of a C+. Vic Fangio's done a great job with the defense, but the offense has been lackluster. Joe Flacco was not great in the first half of the season. I'm excited to see how they rebound on the second half because they finally start to be gelling on offense after week 8, but nonetheless, a C+ is warranted for the great work on defense and not so great work on offense.